So welcome, everyone. We're so grateful that you are here with the iCivics team today. As was mentioned in the video beforehand, we know this has been a very stressful weeks for everyone, and we hope to really use this next hour to recenter you with some new ideas and ways of collaboration. So let's take our mind off the craziness a little bit and learn together. So welcome to a more perfect union when civics games connect with ELA writing activities. So we were already introduced, but as folks who know iCivics, these are our baubles, our avatars. So we wouldn't be introducing ourselves without giving you a view of what we look like in the iCivics world. So first up, my name is Aileen McQuillan, and I'm the Senior Marketing Manager at iCivics.
And my name is Taylor Davis, and I'm the Senior Curriculum Developer at iCivics.
And I'm Laura DeSalvo, the Curriculum Associate at iCivics.
Great. So today's agenda. We're going to start by just taking a brief moment to share with you all how iCivics is responding to school closures and adapting to distance learning at this time. We know that this is impacting all of you, so we want to make sure that we cover that. And then also provide an introduction to iCivics. For those of you that are new to us, welcome. We're really glad to have you. Then Laura and Taylor will take us into leveraging elections in an ELA classroom. And then Laura will share some tips to collaborate with colleagues in different departments, which is really fun. And then we'll close with what to look for at iCivics in election year and some other resources we have that might be useful to you at this time. So let's dive in. So as I mentioned, we know that the past few weeks have been hectic. As an educational organization made up of former teachers, we truly feel the changes you are experiencing very deeply. And our curriculum team has spent our whole organization has spent the past week and a half really talking to our educators on social media, through email, on webinars like this, to really hear what your concerns are and pivot our offerings at this time to make sure that we're addressing those concerns. So you will hear more from iCivics in the coming weeks on what we're creating. But to start, we have put a school closure toolkit on our homepage. You can find it at icivics.org/toolkit, but also on our homepage as well. And for those of you that are new to us, we really suggest starting with our games. Our games are a really great way to give your students a break from the headlines right now, which we know all of us are overwhelmed with, but also add some excitement and motivation to their day, and also keep the learning going, which we know is a big concern. Our games all take 30 to 45 minutes to play and are geared for students in grades 6 through 12. And if you have English language learners, we do have 4 games, 5 almost. We have one coming out in 2 weeks that have a Spanish glossary and translation. So definitely check those out and see if they are a fit for your students. We also provided instructions on how you can access our games for students who are at home without Wi-Fi, which we know is also a big concern as well. So be sure to check out those instructions and see if that is also a fit for you. And apart from the resources, we at iCivics really want to hear from you. So if you have concerns, if you have ideas, if you have needs, please reach out. We've put our support email here. Do not be shy. We would love to hear from you and know that we are here for you. So turning to iCivics, quickly just to give you an overview of what we have and who we are. So we were founded in 2009 by Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. Today is actually her 90th birthday, so happy birthday to her, and what a way to honor her this afternoon together. But we were founded to create educational video games and classroom resources to help students learn civic knowledge, skills, and dispositions so they can be active members of their community, but also our larger democracy. So to date, we have 20 games that cover a range of topics from managing your own presidential campaign, which is really timely right now, to news literacy, also really timely right now, to how the Supreme Court works, and also managing the 3 branches of the U.S. government. And through our games, students really learn by doing. They get put in a role of the judge or a member of Congress or a community activist or even the president. And they get to really do that job and experience it. And it engages them, it challenges them, and it really makes civics relevant to their lives. So our games, please start with them. They're really one of our greatest resources. But games aren't all we have. So we do have over 200 plus resources, including infographics, lesson plans, web quests, a digital tool that features document-based questions and primary sources. So all of these resources are free with an iCivics Educator account, and I'll talk through how to do that shortly. But I do also want to recognize that in this time, we've heard from a lot of you that you're overwhelmed with resources. There's so much being thrown out there at this time. So if you come to us, which we hope you do, please start with our games. They're a great place to start. And also we do have activities around them that help structure pre and post play activity. So how to get access to all of these resources. So you can go to our website at icivics.org to create /login to create a free educator account. Once you're logged in, you can learn about each of the resource types that I just described at our Get Started page. So it should be the first page you hit when you log in. This will just help you get acquainted with the different types and what the offerings are. And as I mentioned with games, we do have extension packs with every single game that we have. So it'll help you teach around the game and reinforce key concepts. So if you are working with a student at home or sending a game home, these will help you structure gameplay to make sure that there's some learning centered around it. All right, so enough about us. I'm going to turn it over to Laura to kick us off.
All right, so let's talk about elections in the ELA classroom. To do that, we've got a couple of poll questions for you, 2 in a row. So get your clickers ready. Here we go. Our first poll question. How interested are your students in the election process or anything about the election? A, very, extremely. B, couldn't care less. C, somewhat interested. D, I have to make the connection for them. So if you could click on the answer that comes closest to your situation. I know we've had a few distractions lately, but think back to your classes. Were students talking about the election? Were they talking about certain candidates or certain issues? In fact, if you go in the chat box and you want to let us know what the biggest issue was for your students, what they were most concerned about or what they were talking about the most, that would be great to get an idea of what was going on in your classes. All right. And it looks like, wow. Okay, so we seem to have a combination of answers here. Some 22% at very, extremely. C, somewhat interested. Looks like that's in first place. Well, it's nice that couldn't care less comes in last. That's fantastic, right? Especially for students like in high school as they're getting closer and closer to becoming voters themselves. So that's good news. Excellent. All right. So our second poll question, how many of you feel confident teaching elections? A, I've got this, no worries. B, I can hold my own. C, I can get through it, but not with confidence. And D, not so much. Or E, nada, nothing, don't got it. So put your answers in there. And just be honest. For some of you, you know, teaching the elections is not your wheelhouse, and that's okay. We actually commend you guys for even thinking about putting the elections into your curriculum. It can be a challenge. We've all been scared of getting that question, that really hard question that we don't know how to answer, or there's that expectation that you as the teacher should know everything. All right, and let's look at some of our answers here. So it looks like B is coming in first. I can hold my own. Good news. C coming in second. I can get through it, but not with confidence. Okay. And I'm looking at your chats and talking about some of the issues. There's COVID-19. I see some gun control, voting rights. Excellent. All right. So if you answered A or B, to the previous poll question, then you're ready to roll, and we're just going to give you some suggestions, some tips for extending your lessons. If you answered C, D, or E, please know that you are not alone, okay? There are a lot of teachers out there who don't feel confident teaching the elections. Maybe they never had a civics class, or if they did, it was years ago and they don't remember. It is a difficult thing to teach if you don't know it that well, and it's something you are going to worry about getting it right. You want to make sure you get it right, and so that's where we come in. iCivics is here to help you. Our games and the supportive materials that go with them are made to be off the shelf and ready to go. You do not need to plan out a whole unit or even plan out introductory lessons. We've done that. So they're there, good to go. The lessons come with step-by-step directions if the classroom to take you right through the lesson without having to do too much background information. And in this day and age, when I know you guys are scrambling for quick, straightforward online lessons, as Aileen was saying in the beginning, you can assign one of our games and assign a writing assignment to it afterwards, you know, a reflection on what you learned during this game. Boom, you've got an assignment and you're ready to go. So it's something to think about. We have two games that focus on the elections. One is called Cast Your Vote, and this is where the player has to evaluate candidates based on their stance on the issues, their personalities, their answer to questions, that kind of thing. And then at the end, they actually do cast a vote for a candidate, as well as two referendum questions, which is a good experience for them. Our second game is called Win the White House, where students have to run their own presidential campaign. And both of these games, like, you can develop writing assignments that go in a bunch of different directions based on, you know, you can do a candidate profile, writing speeches, focusing on issues, etc. There are hundreds of different ways that you can approach these games. So for today's webinar, we're going to focus on Win the White House. It's one of our more popular games. As I said, it challenges the student to run their own presidential campaign, which means they have to raise funds, they have to create media ads, they have to manage and win the Electoral College, and it goes through all these processes for them. And I know you're not playing the game, so we're going to watch a little trailer so that you get an idea, the gist of what's involved in the game. And then when we come back from the trailer, Taylor's going to talk you through some ways to use this game in your ELA classrooms. So let's go.
The team that brought you the 2016 blockbuster election game Win the White House is back. Learn where the rubber meets the road during election season. Win the White House puts you in charge of your own presidential campaign. Create a candidate, pick a slogan, and get ready to jump into the primaries. Do you know where you stand on the issues? Updated for the next election season and beyond, pick issues that matter to you and add them to your campaign. Travel in style as you raise funds for your campaign efforts. Poll states to see your level of support and what issues have traction. Make personal appearances and run media campaigns to capture voters' attention.
Breaking news. This party is on a roll.
Gain momentum, flip states, and keep an eye on the electoral vote tally as the decision day draws near. Can you win the White House?
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about what your students will encounter in Win the White House from what you just saw in the trailer. It looks like a few of you in the chat are familiar with this game and your students have played it before, and some others are new to it. So just to kind of give you a broad overview, the goal of this game is really to simulate the campaign process by putting students in the driver's seat and allowing them to make the decisions of their campaign. They're going to walk through several steps within the game. They'll start at the primary debate. They'll move through primary elections. And then finally, they'll learn about the importance of the Electoral College through 10 rounds of campaigning in the states of their choice. One of the really cool things about Win the White House is that we have just updated it for the 2020 election. And you'll notice that the issues that are reflected in the game are issues that students will see reflected in the campaigns they're watching play out right now. Some of those issues include healthcare, immigration, and also gun rights. And there is an issue guide that goes along with the game. It's downloadable. It, like all of our resources, it's free. And I believe that you should have access to it in your view of the presentation as well. So if you don't, feel free to drop a question in the Q&A and we'll direct you to where that is. Also, students are going to learn all about the campaign process. They get to choose their slogan. They secure funding. They decide what kind of campaign ads to put out and when. And most importantly, they determine what states they're going to visit to offer the biggest boost to their campaign and potential to win the most electoral votes. This game is all about strategy. We wanted it to feel like a real election. We want to simulate that process for students. And so they're going to see how expensive a campaign is. They'll also see how hard it is to win the White House and how long that process takes. So let's talk about how you can leverage this game in your classroom, especially if you're an ELA teacher or if you're a social studies teacher looking to bring ELA or writing activities into your class. If you were one of the people who answered C, B, or E, the lower question, the poll question about you're not quite sure about how to teach elections, maybe you don't feel quite as confident about it, don't worry, these activities are especially for you. And I also want to remind you that on our site, icivics.org, we have tons of lesson plans that also include student readings. They're a really great place to gain the content knowledge you might be looking for to teach about the elections. So we could take a creative writing activity like this one. Have your students play Win the White House. They're going to learn all about the electoral process simply by playing the game. And so that frees you up to really focus on writing skills, especially if you're an ELA teacher. As a teacher teaching ELA, I taught middle school and high school ELA before I worked at iCivics. I probably wouldn't have been that comfortable teaching elections if someone had asked me to, but I would have been very comfortable teaching writing skills. And so I would say for an activity like this, focus on where you can teach those writing skills, such as organization and structure, or crafting a strong central idea. You could focus definitely on audience if they're writing a victory or concession speech, and also voice and tone. Before starting an activity like this, I would probably start with vocabulary. Students will either win the White House or they won't, but they may not know what the word concede or concession means, and so that's a great place for you to bring that into your classroom. And then also an activity like this is going to bring in discussion. Have your students talk about who they think is actually going to win the campaign this year. Why do they think that? Again, tie it back to the game. They're going through the electoral process. They're seeing candidates win states and talking about electoral votes. So ask them how the person they think is going to win the election this year, how they're doing in the states according to the polls. Make that connection for them. Another really cool activity to do is persuasive writing. You can see from these pictures, and I talked about it a little bit, the game does focus on campaign ads, but as you can see, they're a little bit lackluster. They don't really have the content in them. And so this is where your students could really leverage the game. They could focus on persuasive writing techniques, and you could also focus on skills like ethos, pathos, and logos. Have your students write 3 to 5 positive or negative campaign ads. Again, start by showing them real campaign ads. Have them analyze them. Where do they see ethos, pathos, and logos at play? Were those techniques effective? Have them evaluate that. Because your students are seeing really great examples of campaign ads, they're also going to have a really great idea of what they should do for their own. If you have access to technology or your students have access to a phone, they could, of course, record those ads like a television ad. They could also write a script, such as a television ad or a radio ad, or they could do it, mock something up on paper. This could be for online or for print. And we're going to pause for just a second. If you could, in the chat box, if you would take a second just to answer this question, we hope that we're sparking some ideas for you that you could see doing in your actual classroom. And so if you'd answer, what other election-themed writing activities could you plan for your students? Really think about what the game teaches. So again, campaign funding is one of those things. Could your students write a persuasive essay about what they would say to an audience if they were at a fundraising event? You can think about candidate bios, thinking about what the issues in the platform of that candidate are, what kind of experience they bring to the table, what their backstory is. Have your students use that to make a campaign website. That's another writing activity they could do. You could also ask them to play and just simply ask them how well do they think the game teaches the process of elections. Let them reflect on that. They could write about what they think the steps to winning an election are based on the game. and also based on what they're seeing play out right now in real time.
There are so many great ideas coming in the chat box. This is great, everyone. Great job.
Aileen, do you want to share a few?
Well, they're flying so fast. If I can catch a few.
Maybe we can grab a few and come back to it at the end.
This is awesome, everyone. This is creating a great bank of ideas. Let me see if I can pull one. So debate, like come up with potential count. Oh, and it ran away. Taylor, there was a question about what grade level some of those ideas have come from. So I'm not sure if we want to circle back to that to just answer that question.
Yeah. I would definitely say, especially if you're an ELA teacher, you know your standards, you know the skills that you have to teach to your students. And so ethos, pathos, and logos may not be a skill that you're covering in 6th grade, but it may be one that you're covering in 8th grade or 9th grade or 10th grade. I would kind of judge my activities based there. The election is something that all of your students can work on, whether they're in middle school or in high school. We want all students learning about the election. We want all students really leveraging this teachable moment in our history. And so I would focus not so much on the content of elections there, but focus on what are your ELA skills that you're looking to teach. All right, let's talk a second about research. So of course we can pull this game, we can do some writing activities. We could also pull this game and do some research activities. This is a screen capture from our game. Before you play, you actually choose what your issues are gonna be. Again, we mentioned there is an issue guide that goes along with this game. You could have your students research one of these issues. And the reason that I would do this is because you want them thinking about why do we vote for a particular candidate. And if you think about that, some people vote along party lines. What we really want students thinking about is how the candidate is responding to issues that they care about. How would they evaluate that? And so I'd have students research those issues or pick one issue that matters to them, and then look at what the issue is, why is it an issue, what's the history of it in our country. I'd also have them focus on its effects and what the party's stance is on it, or a candidate's recommendation for how they plan to tackle it. After your students research those points, have them weigh in. Ask them what they think about candidates' plans and the solutions. Ask them what their research told them. And then a really, really great thing about our games is that we try to empower students by putting them in the driver's seat. I would definitely carry that out throughout into your classroom. And another way you can do that is by asking students what they would propose the country would do if they were elected president about that issue. Everything, of course, doesn't have to be about writing. You could have your students research and showcase what they've researched by hosting a mock debate. Again, they'll see this process play out in the game. We hope that they're also watching it on TV. You could bring it into your classroom to show them as well, but have them research to stage that debate. This gives them a really great opportunity to see why good research pays off and when it pays off. So we talked about writing, talked about researching. Let's talk really quickly about reading. The election is all over the news. It's going to continue to be all over the news. And this is a really great time to bring it into your ELA classroom, also into your social studies classroom as well. Again, you'd use the game as a starting point, talk about the role the media plays in elections, and then think about skills that you can pull from your ELA curriculum to incorporate with the content of the game. One of those skills is characterization. You can pull a news article and have your students evaluate how the candidates are being characterized in that article. You could also focus on bias and pull a couple of different articles and have your students analyze how a topic or how a candidate or how an issue is being portrayed. If you're looking for a source to pull articles from, especially to show bias, I'd recommend a website called allsides.com. It features articles every day, one from the right, one from the left, and one from the center. And students can use that and compare, again, how issues are being covered. This brings in ELA skills like word choice and tone. It's something you could cover in bias as well. Facts and opinion is another great way to pull reading into the elections. Do your students know the difference between facts and opinion? Probably they do, depending on their grade, but also can they spot it in journalism? And that's what we really want to focus on here. I would break out news articles, I would break out opinion pieces, and talk about what the difference is in those. And then finally, we can pull a little bit more on news literacy and the role of the media by focusing in on myths and disinformation. We have a unit actually that supports introducing your students to news literacy skills, and you can find it on our website. We talk about it really briefly. It is called our News Literacy Unit, and it covers 4 main lessons. They are journalism, misinformation, bias, and opinion and analysis. There are also 4 mini lessons that go along with this unit. They cover topics such as monetization of the news, satire, algorithms, and privacy policies. You can incorporate those into a lesson on the elections, but you don't necessarily have to. This unit, you'll also find a game in this unit called Newsfeed Defenders, but again, we're focusing on the election for this webinar, and so we'll keep that focus. Each lesson comes with a reading. There are activities for students to complete based on what they read about, and then there's a web activity where they can practice the skills they learned about in that lesson. Again, it's all free. It's downloadable on our website. But if you really think about news literacy and elections, this is a great time for you to leverage elections. News literacy, media literacy skills are going to span across content areas. You can do it in ELA class. You can do it in social studies class. And it's really probably one of the skills your students are going to take away with them because it's what they're going to see on their own social media feeds. And we want them to be able to evaluate that critically before they click the share button. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Laura. She's going to talk about tips to collaborate with colleagues in different departments.
All right. Thank you, Taylor. All those ideas are fabulous, and I'm seeing the chat box is like blowing up with all these great ideas. And you can do these ideas by yourself, individually in your own classroom. But I want to shift gears now and talk about collaborating with someone from another department. So if I'm talking, that means there's another poll question. Are you ready? Here you go. How often do you collaborate with members from a different department? So A, all the time, B, during 2 or 3 units a year, C, once in a while, D, almost never, or E, I don't even know who's in the other department, or I am all the departments. I know there's some adult ed folks out there, so you may be the entire humanities department. I don't know. I know a lot of this can depend on the size of your school. I was a high school history teacher. I was in a small high school, and the English department, literally their classrooms were just past mine. They had to walk past my room to get to theirs. So I saw them all the time, and it was easy to collaborate. But I know in a bigger school that may not always be the case. So let's see what we've got here. All the time, 42%. That's awesome. Wow. Once in a while, 25.9% comes in second place. Cool. That is so encouraging to hear and to see. That is awesome. All right. Well then, let's talk a little bit about collaborating. If you've never collaborated before or just once or twice, it really can be an intimidating process to go through to try to align your curriculum, never mind trying to figure out the timing of things. And that's why we're suggesting you start with the presidential election as a place to start, simply because it affects all of us. We're all involved in it. Their students are talking about it. They're probably hearing about it at home. They're certainly hearing about it at school. So it's a good starting ground. Let's just be honest and practical about things. You know, collaboration can be hard. It takes a lot of time, and none of us have enough time, right, ever. If you don't know each other, it can be really intimidating, especially if you have very different teaching styles or different priorities, et cetera. But we encourage you to collaborate across the curriculum, because keep in mind that you each have, if you're talking about the English teachers or if you're talking about history teachers, you each have what the other needs. So ELA teachers, you guys want interesting topics, exciting writing assignments for discussions. Social studies, history teachers, you guys want really well-written essays and reports and research papers, and that can only come from ELA and good English instruction. So keep that in mind as you go forward in this. So I just sort of want to outline several steps to take, just some tips on how to go about this if you've never collaborated with someone before or you've only done it once or twice. So you want to start with finding out who's in and who's interested. So if you're social studies or ELA, contacting the other department. Maybe you send out an email if you know the teachers. Maybe you approach them at a summer professional development session, those sessions you have to go to right before school starts. Maybe you go through your department head or their department head. It all depends on how your school is structured. But once you find someone who's interested, the next steps can be kind of daunting, right? It's like, great, yay, I want to collaborate. Now what? And it can be overwhelming to figure out where you want to start. What do you want to cover? What do you want to talk about? So use iCivics as your common ground. If the other person doesn't know about iCivics, you can introduce them, but then you both have a common starting place when it comes to collaborating. For your next step is coming up with that all-important planning time. And I know, you're all going to say, we don't have enough time. And it's true, you never have enough time. But finding that scheduling some planning time is so important. It's probably the hardest, but it's the most important part of this whole process. And when you do sit down with your collaborator, really map out a time frame for teaching the election. So this year is probably questionable. So let's focus on next year from, say, September to the beginning of November. Look at that calendar and think about how often do you want to talk about the election? Is it one day a week? Is it 15 minutes a day? 2 straight weeks at the end of October? One day before the election? Just think about it and come up with a time frame so that you know what you're working within. And then your next step can be very overwhelming, where you're trying to come up with what assignments, what topics, that kind of thing. So I'm going to suggest that you start with a little selfish brainstorming. So you have your time frame, let's say September to November, and sit down with your department, your requirements, look at all the things that you need to cover, you have to cover, and what you'd like to cover. And just do a little brainstorm list of all the things you need to do or want during that time frame. Departments. So ELA, if you need to do persuasive writing and understanding tone and analyzing media. Social studies, maybe if you're civics, speaking about the electoral process or political parties or power and popular, whatever it is, brainstorm your list and write them down. Then come together and compare your lists. What could complement the other? What could cross over? Could, if the social studies teacher is talking about the Electoral College and explaining that, could that turn into a persuasive essay on whether or not we should keep the Electoral College in the English class, in ELA? Are you both interested in covering the same topic, but from different angles? And this can be a really great way to reinforce how history and English work together, right? So if your topic is power and popularity or something like that, and maybe social studies wants to focus on how candidates use the media, the English department can at the same time be looking at how to analyze the language in ads or speeches. So when you've got your list, do some comparison. How could this cross over? What could lead to another? What could be a research in one class that leads to a debate in another class? See what you can come up with. Now that's all well and good, but what if you do your lists, you compare your lists, and nothing seems to line up? Or it's just overwhelming, or you're just going in completely different directions, right? Don't run out of the room. Regroup. This is where you can use iCivics. Our games all of our games come with extension packs. And extension packs include mini lessons, vocabulary lists, pre-game activities, post-game activities, all that stuff. Okay, so start with the games. Pick a game. So let's say Win the White House, since that's what we've been talking about. Review the extension packs together, okay? And then do the brainstorming process all over again. ELA, brainstorm all the different ways you could use this game. What topics would you like to expand on? What subjects, what things could you hit that would hit your requirements and your standards? Same with social studies, okay? Do your list, the whole process again. Maybe the social studies department wants to look at campaign financing over the last 12 years and how that's changed. And maybe ELA wants to compare slogans and what were catchy slogans, what worked, what didn't work, that kind of thing. You guys can find topics that complement each other, but also reinforce your own departments. They don't have to be connected side by side. It can be a reinforcement of looking at the election from different angles, and that's always super cool. So once you find that and you figure out your topics and which ones you want to cover and how you want to expand it, and you have your time frame, then you want to just move on to mapping out the logistics. Okay, these are the basics right here. Figure it out. Which class will play the games? Or will you play it in both classes? Or will you assign them for homework? Who's going to assign which activities from our extension pack? Are you going to divide and conquer? Or are you going to do it in one class and reinforce in another? Same as vocabulary, the vocabulary lists. Divide and conquer, or cover vocabulary in one class, reinforce in another. And you can just break that right down. And it's not overwhelming. Our extension packs are a handful of activities and vocabulary. It's not like you're going to get 500 things and you don't know what to do. It's really straightforward. You can break it down. All right, so you got your plan, you got your time frame, you've got your topics, you know how it's going to complement, you are ready to go, but we all know that once you get into the classroom, things change, and so making it work can be different than planning it out. So communication is the key to all. First of all, start off the year telling your students that you're working with the other department. I don't know why, but this was always freaked out the students when I was like, yeah, I'm working with Miss Walsh in the English department. And they were like, what, you guys talk to each other? It was crazy. Every year without fail, it always happened. And maybe you won't get those little comments about, why do I have to write? This is an English class. You know, it shows that you're on board together and you both have the same goals, which is fantastic. Check in with your collaborator frequently. We all know things don't always go as planned. You thought it was only going to take 2 days to cover something in class. Well, now it's taking 4, and your whole time frame, your whole schedule is off. Just, you know, keep tabs on that, and also about what's working and what's not working. And that's okay. Just keep the communication lines open. And another thing to think about is reaching out to other people at your school. If you need resources, if you're out of ideas or you're not sure how to make something work, talk to your librarian. They usually have so many resources which are fabulous that can be adapted to both history and social studies and English. Talk to them about maybe even talking to your class about media literacy or doing good research, that kind of thing, because you never know what they have to offer. And then finally, you want to spread the word of your success, of your collaboration. Keep your department updated on how things are going. Even if, you know, you're running into glitches. I mean, this is a practice thing, right? Like, we're not going to get it perfect the first time out, but let your department know how it's going. Ask them for advice, you know, if they can give some ideas. The best ideas I ever had came from other teachers, right? Or were influenced by other teachers. So reach out to them. Maybe if your administration is open to it, share your experiences with the whole faculty during a professional development day, maybe mid-year or at the end of the year, to tell them how it went for you. And of course, we'll be selfish here too and say, tell everyone about our iCivics resources as well. And you can sort of spread the word for collaborating, but even for independent work as well. So to give you more of an idea of what resources we have for the elections, I'm going to throw it back to Aileen, and she is going to talk about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. So what to look for at iCivics in election year. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat box for everyone before I move forward. So we do have an election headquarters on our website right now. It's an easy way for all of our election-related resources to be curated in one spot. So icivics.org/election. So we know right now the election is still ongoing, but it's probably not your focus right now. But as the months, as we head towards November, we'll be ramping up our curriculum around the election and looking to add new curriculum, infographics in terms of timely content, blogs written by fellow educators who are teaching the election in their classroom, and also some interactive activities. So expect to see more on this page. You can visit it anytime. It's available now, and it's everything that we have around the election in one place. So we hope this makes finding the content a little bit easier for you. And then for our ELA teachers on today, I did see a few of you actually mention our persuasive writing unit in the chat as it was flying by. So I wanted to just make sure our ELA teachers know that we have a persuasive writing unit. It's actually one of our most popular units on Share My Lesson, but it's also available on our site. So it has 8 lessons that teach students to argue on paper. And it incorporates our game Supreme Decision, which teaches how the Supreme Court works. So definitely check it out if you're interested. There was a few folks in here that have already used it, so that's really awesome to see. And then for our social studies teachers, we also recommend you explore our Foundations of Government unit, available at that URL right there. That's on our website. This unit covers the understanding of different forms of government, democratic principles, and also distinguishing features of governments around the world. So giving you a little bit of that international view for some students. All right, so your homework. So we definitely, if you haven't already done so, we definitely recommend you head to our website to create a free educator account. The only thing you need to do is provide your email address and some more information about you, and you'll get access to all of our free resources. There was a question in the chat about extension packs, and I actually misspoke. Not all of our games have extension packs, but we're heading in that direction. Most of our brand new games that have just come out all have them, and those are accessible on the educator pages of the game. So when you log in as an educator, you should always see those materials alongside the game. They are not available when you're not logged in, because we want to make sure your students do not get access to any of the answers and also the material unless it's provided to them from you. So definitely go explore Win the White House and cast your vote. Start collaborating with your colleagues. We know that this looks a little bit different right now for you, but no better time to connect, start talking, have conversations, collaborate. Talking to others at this time is going to be really beneficial. We've also seen so much of that over the past week, and it's just inspiring. Sharing on Twitter, on Facebook groups, you're all really lifting each other up at this time. So definitely start collaborating. Visit our election HQ. And then lastly, just let us know how we can help you. As I started this webinar, we are here for you, and we want you to know that we are providing resources at this time that are relevant to you and answer your concerns. So let us know what you need. Email us, tweet at us. We're always active on Twitter and answering questions. But most importantly, take care of yourselves. You're doing an amazing job, and we're really proud of you. So thank you all for joining with us today. And we're going to turn it over to questions.
Great. And this is Emily Koplow back again. And because I think I was having some issues with audio, I'm just going to ask, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we've gotten a lot of questions, and I'll just let folks know that if you don't have your question answered, we will be getting all the questions to our participants, so they will be able to get back to you individually if they can. So our first question is, what if I have a big class of 35 students? Can students work in groups?
Absolutely. We actually encourage partner play with our games and group play. It's a really great way for students to discuss what they're doing in the games, and that sort of discussion actually enhances their learning. You can assign 2 students to a computer or a device or a tablet and have them play together. You could also, if you wanted to, make it a little bit more interactive, you can assign roles. Like one person could be the candidate, the other person could be the campaign manager, and then halfway through the game, they switch roles.
Great. And then we have another question about whether, how to deal with this if the election is a touchy subject with students or leads to conflict.
Yeah, that's a great question. I saw actually a couple of those in the chat box. Yes, you can lead to controversy, and we recommend that you don't avoid controversy, because by avoiding it, you're sending a message that we're not going to talk about it, we're not going to learn it, just shuts people down. If you're going to have discussions in your class, hopefully you have ground rules that you've established for all class discussions. So you want to reinforce that you're going to have a respectful environment. If people make comments or students make comments that maybe are hurtful or upsetting, one technique you can do is try to reframe that question back to the student, because sometimes they're using the wrong words in a sense. So you could say, well, what I hear you say is blah, blah, blah. Is that what you meant? And almost, make it more clear. If it is what they meant, you can try to turn it into a teaching moment where it's not that you don't engage with that question or comment, but more with the audience, with your students. Where did this idea come from? Where do you think this comes from? What informs it? What's the opposite view to this? And try to take it out of the personal and the passionate and make it a little bit more objective. If it's a statement where there's maybe some ignorance or a lack of understanding, maybe it's an opportunity to say, hey, we have a new research assignment. Tonight, you're going to Google 2 or 3 reasons or 2 or 3 facts about this topic, and just be ready to discuss it first thing tomorrow. But you don't want to get your own, you don't want to get upset yourself, and you don't want to yelling at people or having students take the burden of answering someone's. You can take that on and try to make it more objective back to the students as a question.
Thanks, that's super helpful, I think. Next question, what type of background knowledge is needed for teachers? What if I don't have any knowledge of elections?
That's what we're here for. Taylor, you want to take that?
Yeah, even if you don't have any knowledge of elections, and you probably do have some knowledge of elections, right, because we hope you're out there and you're voting, but the activities that I went over earlier in the presentation, especially those creative writing activities, debate activities, research activities, news literacy skills, those are all things that you could do whether you're teaching social studies or not. So you don't have to be an expert in the electoral process. Again, I'll just do a small plug. I think that our lesson plans are really great places to start, even for teachers, because the readings are broken up into just 2 short pages. They're chunked into sections, and they really give you a great breakdown of what you need to know in order to be able to teach it to your students. So I would start there if you're really interested in teaching about elections in your class, but you're kind of uncomfortable with doing so or not so confident in your content knowledge. You can always learn as you go, and remember that the game will teach them a lot just by playing. They'll walk away with a ton of content knowledge just by playing the game.
Great.
And if you're collaborating, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and if you're collaborating with someone in the history department or another department, you can save those questions for that person.
Absolutely.
Great. We're just about out of time, but I just wanted to open the floor back up to you, our presenters. Is there anything else you wanted to add before I close this out?
I think one of the questions early on was how long does it take to play the game? I think we talked about it, but just to reinforce, it's about 30 minutes. It might take a little longer for some students. And they are targeted 6th through 12, but you can easily adapt it to 5th grade. And if you could have 5th graders working in small groups, even groups of 4, if need be, to sort of work their way through the games.
And I'm also seeing a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I'm seeing a couple of questions about where should I start if I want to bring this to my team or to my grade. When you log onto our website, icivics.org, you will also notice a scope and sequence document. That's a really great place to give you an idea of where to start. It's broken up by unit. If you really want to focus on the elections, it lets you know all the resources that are there and start in order of where we would suggest that you start. Of course, you don't have to start there, but it is a good starting place if you're looking for one.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to the 3 of you for your presentation. That was super helpful and such an important topic. And thank you to the participants for joining us. We appreciate feedback and have 2 easy ways for you to provide it. First, please take the survey that will show up on your screen momentarily. This feedback is valuable to our speakers and to us as we plan future webinars. Secondly, visit the registration page for this session on Share My Lesson and add your own rating and review to help others. Before I end the webinar, I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. We are constantly adding resources to our distance learning community with helpful tips and free resources. You can participate in an active discussion with other educators and parents to get advice on how to navigate the new distance learning world. You can also upload resources to the community that might be helpful for other educators. Also, please join us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or wherever you use social media in helping us send our love to teachers and support staff.